Sarah Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her luxury apartment, staring at the glittering lights of San Francisco's skyline. At 26, she had everything most people could only dream of: a Stanford MBA, a penthouse apartment, and a last name that opened every door in Silicon Valley. As the daughter of Michael Chen, CEO of TechGlobe, one of the world's largest tech companies, Sarah had never known what it meant to struggle. But lately, something had been bothering her. She picked up her morning coffee from her marble kitchen counter, the same coffee that her father's employees in the main building had to pay $7 for at the company cafe. The thought made her frown. It was Wednesday morning, and Sarah was preparing for another board meeting. She didn't have to attend. She wasn't officially on the board, but her father had been grooming her to take a senior position in the company. "Learn how things work from the top," he always said. She pulled on her designer suit, checked her perfectly styled hair in the mirror, and headed to her Tesla. The TechGlobe headquarters was a massive glass building that seemed to touch the clouds. As Sarah drove past the employee parking lot, she noticed something she'd never paid attention to before. While the executive parking area was filled with luxury cars, the regular employee lot had many old, worn-out vehicles. Some even had visible dents and rust. Walking through the lobby, Sarah smiled and nodded at the security guard, trying to remember his name. She'd seen him every day for the past year, but had never actually spoken to him. The realization made her uncomfortable. The board meeting started at 9 a.m. sharp. Sarah sat in her usual corner, taking notes on her laptop. The first hour was typical: profit margins, market expansion, competitor analysis. Then came the human resources presentation. "Employee satisfaction has dropped 15% since last quarter," the HR director announced, showing a graph on the screen. "However, this data comes from only 30% of our workforce who completed the survey, so it might not be statistically significant." Sarah watched as the board members nodded dismissively. Her father was checking his phone. Nobody seemed concerned about why 70% of employees hadn't even bothered to fill out the survey. During the lunch break, Sarah went down to the cafeteria instead of eating in the executive dining room. She sat alone in a corner, watching the employees. They walked quickly, ate quickly, and most were working on their laptops while eating. She overheard fragments of conversations. "Can't believe they cut our health benefits again. My parking fee just went up. Did you see the new policy about overtime?" Later that afternoon, Sarah visited different departments, something she occasionally did as part of her learning experience. In marketing, everyone sat straight and smiled when she passed. In it, people quickly minimized their screens. In customer service, the manager suddenly appeared to give her a tour, while the call center employees looked tense and avoided eye contact. That evening, Sarah stayed late at the office. Around 8 p.m., as she was about to leave, she saw the cleaning staff arrive. They moved quietly through the building, almost like shadows. One older woman was limping slightly as she pushed her cleaning cart. When Sarah smiled at her, the woman looked startled, then quickly lowered her eyes and hurried past. Driving home, Sarah couldn't shake off what she'd seen. She thought about the board meeting, the fake smiles, the nervous employees, and the invisible cleaning staff. Her father had always taught her that numbers told the real story of a business. But today, she'd seen something the numbers weren't showing. In her apartment, Sarah opened her laptop and began researching. She looked up average salaries at TechGlobe, cost of living in the area, and employee reviews on various websites. The more she read, the more her unease grew. The glowing press releases about TechGlobe being a best place to work seemed to tell a very different story from the anonymous employee reviews she was reading. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. She stood again at her window, but this time the glittering city lights didn't look so beautiful. They looked like a facade, just like the smiles she'd seen at the office. She had spent her whole life in a golden bubble, believing she understood her father's company. Now, for the first time, she was beginning to suspect that she didn't know anything at all. She needed to know the truth, not the truth presented in board meetings or annual reports, but the real truth. But how could she ever get honest answers when everyone changed their behavior the moment they saw her coming? An idea began to form in her mind, a crazy, impossible idea. But once it took root, she couldn't shake it off. 2 days after the board meeting, Sarah paced in her father's luxurious home office. The walls were covered with TechGlobe's achievements, Framed magazine covers, awards, and photos of Michael Chen shaking hands with world leaders. Sarah had always felt proud seeing these symbols of success. Now, they made her nervous. "Dad, we need to talk," Sarah said, watching her father look up from his laptop. Michael Chen was a self-made billionaire who had built TechGlobe from nothing. At 58, he still worked 12-hour days and expected everyone else to do the same. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" he asked, giving her his full attention. Despite his busy schedule, he always had time for his only child. Sarah took a deep breath. "I want to work at TechGlobe as a janitor." Her father's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "You want to what?" "Not as Sarah Chen," she explained quickly. "As someone else, someone normal. I want to see how things really work from the bottom." Michael Chen laughed, then realized his daughter wasn't joking. "Sarah, this isn't some reality TV show. We have shareholders, board members, responsibilities." "That's exactly why we need to do this," Sarah insisted. She pulled out her tablet and showed him the research she'd done. "Our employee turnover rate is the highest it's been in 5 years. The satisfaction surveys only show responses from 30% of employees. Don't you want to know why the other 70% didn't respond?" Her father's expression turned serious. "We have HR departments for this kind of thing." "And when was the last time an employee told HR the complete truth?" Sarah challenged. "Everyone knows HR reports to management. Nobody will say what they really think if they want to keep their job." Michael stood up and walked to the window, a habit he shared with his daughter when deep in thought. "Even if I agreed to this madness, it would never work. People would recognize you." Sarah pulled out another tablet, this one showing images she'd created using a photo editing app. "Not if I do this right. Dark hair instead of blonde. No makeup. Different clothes. A slight accent. I thought it all through." "It's too risky," Michael argued. "If the media found out, then they'd know we care enough about our employees to actually try to understand their lives," Sarah countered. "Dad, you always taught me that real leaders aren't afraid to get their hands dirty. You started this company fixing computers in your garage. When was the last time you really knew what was happening on the ground floor?" Her father was quiet for a long moment. Sarah could see him processing her words, weighing risks against potential benefits, just like he did with business decisions. 3 months, Sarah added. "That's all I'm asking for. Let me work as a night shift janitor for 3 months. No special treatment. No one knows except you and me. I'll create a complete background story, get fake references, go through the normal hiring process." Michael sat back down heavily in his chair. "Your mother would have loved this idea," he said softly. "She always said I lost touch with reality after the company went public." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Her mother had passed away 5 years ago, but her influence still shaped their family's important decisions. "How would you even do this?" Michael asked, showing the first signs of considering the idea. Sarah pulled out a folder. She prepared for this question. "I've created a complete identity. Maria Santos, 25, community college graduate, recently moved from Arizona looking for work. I've studied janitorial procedures, common cleaning products, everything I'd need to know. I've even practiced walking differently. No one will connect Maria the janitor with Sarah Chen." Her father studied the documents, his business mind noting every detail. "And what exactly do you hope to learn from this?" "The truth," Sarah said simply. "Not what people tell us in meetings or write in reports, but the real truth about how our company treats people, the things nobody would ever say to the CEO's daughter." Michael Chen stood up again, this time walking to the wall of achievements. He stared at them for a long moment before turning back to his daughter. 3 months, he said finally. "Not a day longer. And if there's even a hint that someone has recognized you, it ends immediately." Sarah nodded, trying to hide her excitement. "Thank you, Dad." "Don't thank me yet," he warned. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." Looking at her father's worried face, Sarah realized he was right. She had no idea what was coming, but she knew she had to do it anyway. Maria Santos, formerly Sarah Chen, stood nervously in the basement of TechGlobe headquarters at 6 p.m. on a Monday evening. Gone were her designer clothes, replaced by plain black work pants and a gray uniform shirt. Her once blonde hair was now dark brown, tied back in a simple ponytail. She had practiced her slight Spanish accent for weeks. "Welcome to the night shift," said George, the cleaning supervisor, a tired-looking man in his 50s. "You'll be working with Carmen tonight. She'll show you the basics." He gestured to a short woman arranging supplies on a cleaning cart. Carmen smiled warmly. "First time doing this kind of work?" "Is it that obvious?" Maria asked nervously, remembering to add her practiced accent. "Don't worry, everyone starts somewhere," Carmen reassured her. "Let's start with the supply cart." For the next hour, Carmen taught Maria about different cleaning solutions, the proper way to mop floors, and how to efficiently empty hundreds of trash bins. The cart was heavier than Maria expected, and her hands already hurt from wringing out mops. "We start with the executive floor," Carmen explained as they pushed their carts toward the elevator. "They're usually gone by now, and Mr. Chen likes his office cleaned first." Maria's heart raced as they entered her father's office. It felt surreal to be here as someone else, cleaning the very desk where she had sat for countless meetings. She noticed things she'd never seen before. Coffee stains on the carpet, fingerprints on the glass walls, the way Carmen carefully straightened every chair to exactly the same angle. "Mr. Chen is very particular," Carmen commented. "Once I forgot to dust his awards shelf, and the morning supervisor got a complaint." Maria felt a strange mix of embarrassment and surprise. She'd never known her father complained about such things. As the night progressed, the physical demands of the job began to take their toll. Maria's back ached from bending to clean under desks. Her feet throbbed in their cheap work shoes. By midnight, her hands were red and raw from cleaning solutions. But more eye-opening than the physical challenges were the conversations she overheard. As employees worked late into the night, they spoke freely, unaware of the invisible cleaning staff nearby. "Another deadline impossible to meet," she heard one engineer complain in the break room. "But what choice do we have? My kid's school costs more than my mortgage." In the marketing department, two women discussed their commutes. 3 hours each way, one said. "Can't afford anything closer to the office, but at least I can sleep on the train." Around 2 a.m., during their brief lunch break in the basement break room, Maria learned more about Carmen's life. The woman had 2 children and worked 3 jobs: Tech Globe at night, a retail store in the morning, and weekend shifts at a local restaurant. "How do you manage all that?" Maria asked, genuinely amazed. Carmen shrugged. "My mother helps with the kids. The cleaning job pays better than most, $16 an hour, but in this area," she shook her head, "everything is so expensive. My daughter needs braces, but the company insurance doesn't cover much orthodontic work." Maria remembered the recent board meeting where they discussed reducing dental coverage to cut costs. The savings had seemed reasonable on paper. Now, looking at Carmen's tired face, those numbers took on a different meaning. By 4 a.m., Maria's muscles were screaming. They had cleaned 4 floors, countless bathrooms, and hundreds of workstations. Her expensive manicure was ruined, and she had a deeper appreciation for the term back-breaking work. As they finished their shift at 6 a.m., the morning employees began arriving. Maria watched as they dropped their coffee cups into freshly emptied bins and walked across just mopped floors without a glance at the cleaning staff. "Good job tonight," Carmen said kindly, noticing Maria's exhaustion. "It gets easier after the first few weeks." Driving home in her modest rental car, part of her cover, Maria could hardly keep her eyes open. Her luxury apartment was waiting, but she had rented a small studio across town to maintain her disguise. As she collapsed onto her narrow bed, still in her uniform, Maria thought about Carmen heading to her second job. She thought about the employees sleeping on trains during long commutes, and the engineers staying late to meet impossible deadlines. One night had shown her more about Tech Globe than a year of board meetings. And this was just the beginning. 2 weeks into her undercover role, Maria, Sarah, had fallen into the rhythm of night shift work. Her hands had developed calluses, and her muscles had adjusted to the constant physical activity. But more importantly, she was no longer just the new girl. She was becoming part of the invisible army that kept Tech Globe running while others slept. Carmen had become more than just a trainer. She was now a friend. They shared their lunch breaks at 2 a.m., sitting in the dimly lit basement break room. Tonight, Carmen was showing Maria pictures of her kids, Angela, 12, and Miguel, 8. Angela got an A in her science project, Carmen said proudly, showing a photo of a girl with a solar system model. She wants to be an engineer. I tell her to look at the Tech Globe engineers she sees when we clean. Maybe one day she'll be like them. Maria felt her throat tighten. She knew the starting salary for engineers at Tech Globe was $150,000, while Carmen made barely $33,000 a year cleaning their offices. Their break room conversations were often interrupted by other cleaning staff members. There was Robert, a college student working nights to pay his tuition. Jin, an elderly Korean woman who sent most of her earnings to her sick husband back home, and Marcus, a former factory worker who lost his job when automation took over. You know what's funny? Marcus said one night as they all shared some cookies Carmen had baked. These tech people create robots to replace workers like me, then hire us to clean their offices when we can't find other work. The others laughed, but Maria heard the pain behind his words. She wrote everything down in her journal each morning before sleeping, conversations, observations, and the countless small indignities she witnessed. One night, while cleaning the HR department, Maria and Carmen overheard two managers talking late. We need to process these benefit cuts before the quarter ends, one said. Let's start with the cleaning staff. They're contracted workers anyway, so there won't be much pushback. Carmen pretended not to hear, but Maria saw her hands shake as she mopped the floor. Later, Carmen confided that without her current health insurance, she wouldn't be able to afford her daughter's asthma medication. The cleaning crew also had their own hidden communication system. They used their phones to warn each other when certain executives were still in the building, the ones known for making unreasonable demands or treating them rudely. Maria was surprised to find her father's name on this list. Mr. Chen isn't the worst, Jin explained one night. But he never looks at us. 20 years I cleaned his office, and he has never once said hello. As weeks passed, Maria learned more about her co-workers' lives. Robert lived in his car 3 nights a week to save on gas money for his long commute. Jin worked through severe arthritis pain because she couldn't afford to miss a shift. Carmen's daughter Angela had stopped attending school field trips because the extra fees were too much. The night crew shared more than just work. They shared food, stories, and support. When Marcus's car broke down, everyone pitched in what they could to help with repairs. When Jin missed work due to her arthritis, they divided her floors among themselves so she wouldn't lose pay. One morning, as Maria was leaving work, she saw her father arriving early as usual. She was emptying trash bins near the entrance, and for the first time, she experienced what Jin had described. Michael Chen walked past without a glance, checking his phone while she stood frozen, garbage bag in hand. That evening, before starting her shift, Maria sat in her car and cried. She cried for Carmen's children, for Jin's arthritis, for Marcus's lost career, and for Robert's dreams of education. But mostly, she cried because she was beginning to understand the true cost of corporate success. It was measured in the invisible struggles of people like her new friends. Her father had always taught her that business was about numbers, but now she knew better. Business was about people, and she was finally getting to know them, not as statistics in a report, but as human beings with hopes, dreams, and daily battles that no executive board would ever see. As she wiped her tears and put on her uniform, Maria knew she couldn't go back to being just Sarah Chen, the CEO's daughter. She had to find a way to bridge these two worlds she now knew so intimately. 6 weeks into her undercover mission, Maria, Sarah, arrived at work to find the building buzzing with unusual activity. TechGlobe was preparing to launch its newest software platform, and the tension was palpable even at night. Everyone needs to work extra hours this week, George announced to the cleaning crew. The launch team will be here 24/7, so we need constant cleaning coverage. No overtime pay, it's in your contracts. Maria watched her coworkers' faces fall. Carmen immediately pulled out her phone, frantically texting her mother about extended childcare. Jin closed her eyes briefly, probably calculating how her arthritic hands would handle the extra work. The next few days were brutal. The launch team occupied entire floors, leaving trails of coffee cups, takeout containers, and scattered papers in their wake. The cleaning crew worked nonstop, their usual routine disrupted by programmers who never seemed to sleep. Late one night, while cleaning around a group of engineers, Maria overheard their conversation. They expect us to debug this entire system by Friday, one young programmer said, his eyes red from exhaustion. I haven't seen my kids in 3 days. At least you're getting paid for the overtime, another replied. The support staff gets nothing extra. I heard the cleaning lady, Carmen, talking about missing her other job because of these hours. Maria's heart sank. She knew Carmen couldn't afford to lose her morning retail job. During their shortened break, Carmen confirmed her fears. The store manager said he can't keep holding my position if I'm not reliable, Carmen said, her voice trembling. But if I leave here early, George will replace me. He already has a waiting list of people wanting this job. The crisis peaked on Wednesday night. Carmen received a call from her mother. Angela's asthma was acting up again. The girl needed to go to the emergency room, but Carmen's mother couldn't leave Miguel alone. I have to go, Carmen told George, her voice desperate. My daughter can't breathe. If you leave now, don't bother coming back. George replied coldly. We have deadlines to meet. Maria watched in horror as Carmen stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. The choice between her daughter's health and the job that paid for her medications seemed impossibly cruel. I'll cover her section, Maria found herself saying. Please, let her go. Georgia looked annoyed but nodded curtly. As Carmen rushed out, whispering thank you through her tears, Maria realized she would be cleaning 2 sections alone. Her body screamed in protest, but her determination grew stronger. Throughout the night, Maria pushed through exhaustion she had never known before. Her hands blistered and bled, but she kept working. She thought of Angela in the emergency room, of Carmen's fear of losing her job, of all the invisible sacrifices happening in this building. Around 3 a.m., she was cleaning the executive conference room when she overheard 2 senior managers talking. The launch is going great, one said. We'll definitely hit our bonus targets this quarter. Chen made the right call, pushing everyone to the limit, the other replied. The cleaning crew complained, but what do they expect? They're easily replaceable. Maria's hands tightened on her mop handle. She thought about her father in his office, probably unaware of how his decisions were affecting people like Carmen, or maybe he knew but had forgotten what it meant to struggle. By morning, Maria was barely standing. She had completed both sections, but at a cost. Her uniform was soaked with sweat, her back felt broken, and her hands were raw. As she gathered her cleaning supplies, her phone buzzed, a text from Carmen. Angela is stable. Doctor says it was stress-triggered. I can't lose this job. My baby needs her medicine. Maria sat down heavily on a nearby chair, her body and heart aching. In the pre-dawn light, she could see her father's car pulling into his reserved parking spot. In a few hours, he would be in meetings discussing the successful launch, while Carmen would be facing her angry retail manager and Jin would be struggling to lift her cleaning cart with swollen hands. The crisis wasn't just about a product launch or extra hours. It was about a system that treated some people as disposable while others earned bonuses. As Maria clocked out, she knew something had to change. The question was, how could Maria the janitor make a difference when even Sarah Chen, the CEO's daughter, had been blind to these realities for so long? 8 weeks into her undercover role, Maria arrived at work earlier than usual. The product launch crisis had passed, but its effects lingered. Carmen was still working extra shifts at a new retail job to make up for lost wages, and Jin's arthritis had worsened from the overtime. That night started differently. While preparing her cleaning cart in the basement, Maria noticed Robert, the college student, wasn't at his usual spot. Instead, she found him in the parking garage, sleeping in his old Honda Civic. Robert? She called softly, tapping on his window. He jerked awake, embarrassed. Maria, my apartment lease ended. Rent went up by $500. He couldn't finish the sentence. How long have you been living here? She asked. 2 weeks, he admitted. But I'm not the only one. Check the back corner of the garage. Maria walked to the area Robert pointed out. Her heart stopped. 3 cars were parked there, all with sunscreens up. Inside each, she could make out sleeping forms. She recognized one as David, a junior software engineer she often saw working late. Back in the building, Maria's hands shook as she cleaned. She started documenting everything on her phone, taking pictures of the sleeping cars, recording conversations, saving screenshots of work schedules and pay stubs her coworkers shared with her. Around midnight, the breaking point came. A company-wide email went out announcing third-quarter bonuses for executives. Maria was cleaning near a printer when the document came through. The bonus pool was $50 million, enough to give every cleaning staff member a living wage for 5 years. She walked to the bathroom and threw up. When she returned, Carmen was waiting with concerned eyes. "Are you okay, Maria? You look pale." Maria couldn't hold it in anymore. "How do you do it, Carmen? How do you stay here, working so hard, while they—" She gestured at the executive offices. Carmen sat down beside her. "My father was a janitor too," she said softly. "He always told me, your work makes other people's work possible. Without us, this building would fall apart in a week. That gives me dignity, even if they don't see it." Maria thought about her own father. Did he know people were sleeping in his parking garage? Did he realize his bonus announcement went out the same day Robert became homeless? Later that night, while cleaning the HR department, Maria found something that pushed her over the edge. On a desk was a proposal for further benefit cuts, specifically targeting contracted workers. The document mentioned saving $2 million annually by reducing health coverage, the exact cost of the new executive gym being installed on the top floor. She pulled out her phone and started recording everything. She photographed the documents, recorded the empty office spaces with people's cars becoming bedrooms, and filmed the cleaning staff's working conditions. She interviewed willing coworkers, promising to keep their identities safe. At 4 a.m., while cleaning the executive floor, Maria passed her father's office. Through the glass walls, she could see the photos on his desk, including one of her at her Stanford graduation. The contrast between that smiling, privileged girl and the woman she had become hit her hard. She made a decision. In the quiet hours before dawn, Maria wrote 2 letters. One was her resignation as Maria Santos, citing personal reasons. The other was a message to her father, not as his daughter but as someone who had seen the truth of his company from the bottom. As she finished her shift, Maria looked at her calloused hands and thought about everything they had learned to do. They had cleaned toilets, mopped floors, and carried heavy garbage bags. But more importantly, they had held Carmen's hands when she cried about her daughter, helped Jin lift her cart when her arthritis was bad, and shared food with Robert when he had nothing. These hands would now do something else. They would tell the truth. Walking to her car as the sun rose, Maria passed the section of the garage where her coworkers slept. She touched each car gently, making a silent promise. Change was coming, and this time it would start from the bottom, not the top. She had all the evidence she needed. Now came the hard part, deciding how to use it. After 2 months and 3 weeks undercover, Sarah Chen decided it was time for Maria Santos to disappear. But first, she owed the truth to those who had become her real friends. She asked Carmen to meet her at a small coffee shop far from Tech Globe. Carmen arrived looking worried, probably expecting bad news about Maria quitting. She wasn't wrong, but the truth would be far more shocking. "Carmen," Maria began, her voice shaking, "I haven't been honest with you." She wiped off her makeup, removed her colored contacts, and let her natural accent return. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm Michael Chen's daughter." Carmen sat in stunned silence, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her mouth. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. "I knew there was something different about you. No one learns to clean that badly and works that hard to improve unless they have a reason." Sarah felt tears forming. "You're not angry?" "Oh, I'm angry," Carmen said, her face turning serious. "But not at you. You chose to learn the truth. That's more than any executive has ever done." Over the next few hours, Sarah shared everything: why she went undercover, what she'd learned, and what she planned to do. Carmen listened, occasionally nodding, sometimes wiping tears. "I want to show the board everything," Sarah explained. "But I need your help. Will you and the others tell your stories? I promise to protect everyone's jobs." Carmen thought for a moment. "Let me talk to the others. They trust me." The next night, Sarah met with the night shift crew in Robert's classroom at the community college where he studied. She revealed her identity to them all. The reactions ranged from shock to disbelief to, in Jin's case, quiet understanding. "I knew you were someone else," Jin said softly. "Your hands were too soft at first, but you worked hard and never looked down on us. That's what matters." One by one, they agreed to help. Robert shared photos of the employees sleeping in their cars. Jin provided years of documentation showing how benefits had been cut. Marcus contributed recordings of managers discussing how to avoid giving raises. Sarah spent 3 days preparing her presentation. She compiled everything into a detailed report: photographs, videos, financial documents, and personal testimonies. She included statistics on living wages, local housing costs, and healthcare expenses. Every spreadsheet showed how small changes in executive compensation could dramatically improve workers' lives. The night before the board meeting, she visited her father at home. "Dad," she said, walking into his office, "tomorrow, Sarah Chen is making a presentation to the board, and Maria Santos is coming with her." Michael Chen looked up sharply. "What did you find?" Sarah placed her report on his desk. "Everything. And tomorrow, everyone else will see it too." Her father spent hours reading the report. Sarah watched his face change as he saw his company through new eyes. Through the eyes of those who cleaned his office, who couldn't afford to live near their workplace, who chose between medicine and food. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" he finally asked. "Because no one could," Sarah replied. "Not until someone became one of them." The next morning, Sarah stood before the board of directors. She wore her cleaning uniform, but her hair was back to its natural color. Carmen, Jin, Robert, and Marcus sat in the back of the room, nervous but determined. "3 months ago," Sarah began, "I became Maria Santos, a night shift janitor at Tech Globe. Today, I'm going to show you what I learned about our company, not from spreadsheets or reports, but from the people who keep it running while we sleep." For the next 2 hours, she presented her findings. She showed videos of employees sleeping in cars, played recordings of managers discussing benefit cuts, and displayed charts comparing executive bonuses to worker salaries. Carmen and the others shared their stories, their voices growing stronger as they spoke. The board members sat in stunned silence. Some looked ashamed, others angry, a few seemed moved to tears. Sarah's father sat quietly, watching it all. When she finished, Sarah looked directly at her father. "We talk about innovation and changing the world," she said. "Let's start by changing how we treat the people who make our success possible." The room was silent. Everything depended on what would happen next. The boardroom remained silent for several long moments after Sarah's presentation. Then Michael Chen stood up. All eyes turned to the CEO, waiting for his response to his daughter's dramatic revelation. 25 years ago, he began, his voice unusually emotional, "I was cleaning offices at night while trying to build my first computer. I had forgotten that person, my daughter." He looked at Sarah with pride. "Helped me remember him." He walked to where Carmen, Jin, Robert, and Marcus sat. "I owe you an apology, not just for not seeing you, but for forgetting what it means to be unseen." Then, turning to the board, his voice grew stronger. "We're making changes, starting today." The next few weeks brought a whirlwind of transformations at Tech Globe. Sarah, appointed as the new head of employee relations, worked directly with her father to implement sweeping reforms. First came the immediate changes. All cleaning staff were made full-time employees with benefits, their wages doubled to match the local living wage. The company created an emergency housing assistance program, which immediately helped Robert and others move out of their cars and into affordable apartments. Carmen's daughter Angela received a full scholarship to a STEM program, part of a new initiative for employees' children. Jin's medical coverage was expanded to include comprehensive arthritis treatment. Marcus was enrolled in a tech retraining program, combining his manufacturing experience with new skills. But the biggest changes were structural. Sarah established an employee advocacy board, where workers from every level could speak directly to management. The board included Carmen, who brought years of ground-level experience and unwavering honesty to the role. The company converted its newly built executive gym into a subsidized daycare center. Executive bonuses were tied not just to profits, but to employee satisfaction and retention rates. The parking garage where employees had slept was transformed into a subsidized housing complex for workers. 3 months after Sarah's presentation, Tech Globe held a company-wide meeting. For the first time, the cleaning staff attended not as workers, but as equal participants. Sarah watched as her father addressed the crowd. "Real innovation isn't just about technology," Michael Chen declared. "It's about people. All people. Every person in this room is Tech Globe, from our newest janitor to our most senior executive." The story leaked to the media, of course. But instead of the scandal some board members had feared, it became a revelation. Other companies faced pressure to examine their own treatment of workers. Several CEOs sent their own children undercover, though none lasted as long as Sarah had. 1 year later, Sarah sat in the same coffee shop where she had first revealed her identity to Carmen. But this time, she wasn't alone. Carmen, now a senior member of the Employee Advocacy Board, sat beside her, along with Jin, Robert, now a junior programmer, and Marcus, who led the company's Automation Ethics Committee. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Carmen asked, watching her daughter Angela walk in, wearing her Tech Globe STEM program jacket. Sarah shook her head. "I just wanted to understand. I never expected to find a family." "You know what the best change is?" Jin said, her hands no longer swollen thanks to proper medical care. "Now the executives say hello when we clean their offices. Small things matter." Robert nodded. "And now I can afford both college and an apartment. Though sometimes I miss my Honda bedroom," he joked. The coffee shop door opened, and Michael Chen walked in, without security, without pretense. He joined their table, something that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "The board approved our latest proposal," he announced. "We're expanding the program nationwide. Every Tech Globe office will implement the same changes." Sarah looked around the table at these people who had started as subjects of her investigation and become her closest friends. She thought about her mother, who had always taught her that true leadership means serving others. "We still have work to do," she said, thinking of other companies, other workers still struggling. "Then we'll do it," Carmen replied firmly. Together. As they sat in that coffee shop, sharing stories and planning future changes, Sarah realized that success wasn't measured in stock prices or market share. It was measured in dignity restored, in lives improved, in bridges built between worlds that had seemed impossibly far apart. The CEO's daughter had gone undercover to learn about her father's company. Instead, she had learned about humanity, justice, and the true meaning of family. And in doing so, she had changed not just a company, but an entire industry's understanding of what business could and should be. The end.